All right.
Ryan, if you're watching this, shout out to Ryan.
Wake up!
Crazy.
This week we're talking about Jonah.
Yeah, so Jonah is actually a very different book than the rest of the minor prophets that we've covered because it's not a compilation of sermons or a prophecy or a vision given by God to the prophet, but rather it's just the story of the prophet Jonah. There's two different ways that you can view the book of Jonah based upon who you think wrote it. If you think Jonah wrote it, it would be an account of Jonah's own mistakes, and he's writing about all the things that he did that were wrong. But then if you think that someone else wrote it, it's just a story of the prophet Jonah having a terrible attitude.
Starting in chapter 1, Jonah is commissioned by God to go to Nineveh and to preach. And he doesn't want to, and so he hops on a ship that's run by some pagans, and he tries to go to Tarshish, which is pretty much the farthest from Nineveh that you can go. God sends a storm to tell Jonah to wake up, and the sailors, they draw some straws, and eventually they determine that this storm was sent by Jonah's God. And so Jonah gets up and he says, "Oh, I'm a Hebrew and I worship the God that made the sea and the land." But do you? Because you're trying to run from him. So you kind of have to question his motives in what he's saying there. Jonah tells the sailors to throw him overboard, but the sailors do, and they pray to God that Jonah's blood not be on their hands. And we see that the sailors actually turn toward God and follow him. After he's thrown overboard, God sends a fish to swallow Jonah, and it prevents his death, but he has to spend 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of this fish. Chapter 2 starts, and Jonah's in the belly of the fish, and he starts this prayer. And he never really apologizes for what he's done wrong, but he does thank God for not abandoning him. And he says that going forward, he'll do what he's told, and he won't question it. The fish vomits Jonah out, and it gives him a second chance to do what he knew was right the first time. In chapter 3, God tells Jonah once again, go to Nineveh, and this time he actually goes. We're told that Nineveh was a really big city, and that it would take 3 days to get across the city. And on the first day, Jonah cries out, 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. That's all that we're told that he says. And when the people heard this, they believed in God, and they called for a fast, and they put on sackcloth, and they mourned the things that they had done. And when the king got wind of this, he did the same. He took off his robe, put on his sackcloth, and he sat in ashes. He called for a nationwide fast and repentance, and he commands all of the people to turn from their evil and violence and to turn toward God, that he might have mercy on them and forgive them for the things that they've done. God saw their repentance, and he had mercy on them. In chapter 4, you see this conversation between God and Jonah. And it's really just Jonah pouting and complaining, and God teaching him a lesson. Jonah gets mad that God had showed pity to the Ninevites, and he says, "This is why I didn't want to come here, because I knew you were forgiving, and I knew you'd have mercy on them. Just kill me, because I don't want to live." But God responds with, "Do you want to be angry?" So Jonah, he goes outside the city to pout, and he's sitting under this booth, and God brings up a plant to give him shade. So he sits under the shade, and he's content in his pouting and his anger. But the next night, God sends a worm to destroy this plant. And so when he wakes up the next day, the plant's withered and dead, and it provides no shade. Jonah, he sits there under the scorching heat, and he's even more mad. God says, "Are you mad about the plant?" And Jonah's like, "Yeah, I'm mad. Mad enough to die." He keeps wanting to die for the smallest little inconveniences. But God teaches him this lesson, and he says, "You pity the plant you didn't even work for. Should I not do the same for Nineveh? There are 120,000 people there who don't even know their right hand from their left. So should I just not care about them? Should I just leave them?" And that's the end of the book. That's all we're told. We're not told what Jonah says in response to this, but you kind of have to wonder, is God asking this question of Jonah, or is he asking it of us? The whole book really is just a mirror that's presented to us where we can look and we can reflect on ourselves and see, oh, God dealt with Jonah when he behaved like this. And sometimes God deals with the Jonah that's in me.
There's a lot that we can learn from Jonah. So go through the discussion questions and answer those. Figure out the takeaways that you learn from Jonah. And have fun studying Jonah this week. We'll see you next week.